You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
Let's do it. We got it.
When do we start? Do you have a countdown? Do you go like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, talk?
No, you just did it. We're on.
Oh, we're on the air. Okay, good. Okay, how do you want to envision this discussion going?
Very ugly. Bloody.
Well, we're three ugly guys, so, that's not hard to do.
I don't think it's going to get as brutal as having Martin Popoff on, so.
Ah, our Martin.
So people are probably wondering why I'm talking like Don Corleone. So I've got the throat surgery in. It's going to take a couple weeks before my throat gets better, so you guys are just going to have to live through it. So,
well, it just goes to show, Bob. I mean, this just shows your true dedication to metal. I mean, the fact that you're on here like this, sounding as bad as you do, but you still want to do it, to talk to us, and to bring this amazing show to your listeners, that speaks for real dedication.
Come on, this is a dream come true. Monte, Connor, and Derek Oliver on the same phone conversation with me? Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, how could I pass up the opportunity to talk to Derek Oliver, one of my oldest and dearest friends, and one of the people I've learned more from music about than any other man alive, which is going to make it painful for me to disagree with him and make him look silly on this discussion, but I'm going to have to do it.
As long as you agree to you roll over whenever I disagree with you. So.
Yes, I will defer to you, old man.
I'm going to start the conversation off by saying, well, both of you actually, what do you prefer, single live albums or double live albums?
Good question. Go ahead, Monte.
Well, you know what? I guess double, because when you think about, you think about the classic 70's double record, that's kind of like the epitome of what people judge live records by. So I have to say it would be the double. Keep in mind, a double record in the 70's is like, it's like a long single CD these days. So it doesn't, because records were limited to be like 40 or so minutes each, even a double live record is by no means excessive or too long. And then you have single live records like Foghat Live, and you're just like, you're crushed that there's only a single disc. You want to hear more. It's only 6 songs on Foghat Live, so should have been a double. So yeah, to answer your question, when I think of classic live records, of course it's got to be the double live, no question. Derek, I know you agree with that, of course.
Yes, of course, but it was a sort of trick question because there are triple live albums and even quadruple live albums. What would you like your live albums to be quadruple in terms of the length of the music, or are you okay with it being a double live or a single live?
I prefer double. I mean, as a perfect example, I saw Uli John Roth the other night at the Gramercy Theater here in New York, and he played for almost 3 hours. And you know what? It's just too much. I'd rather have seen like a show that's an hour and a half than a 3-hour show. It's just after a while it becomes overkill. So yeah, I do think a triple live record or a quadruple live record, it would be a little bit tiring, at least to listen to in one go. So yeah, I think to me, like a double live record at around 75 minutes seems to be just the perfect length.
Who released a quadruple live? I know Wings Over America was a triple live album. Who did a quadruple live album?
Well, I think Chicago.
Okay.
Whether you class that as a rock band or not, they did a quadruple. And I'm trying to think, in my book, I've written a book, which we'll get into later. There's several triple lives, but like, for example, I'm just looking at it here, actually, Yes Song.
That's right, that's triple live. Yeah.
And you have, you are correct, Wings Over America was in fact a triple, not a quadruple. But, what would you say, you guys, what would you say was the first time in the record business that a double live record made headlines? And what one do you think it was?
Deep Purple made in Japan.
Oh, that's easy. What's that, Bob?
Deep Purple made in Japan.
Well, I guess it depends how old you are, right? Because I wasn't a teenager when that record came out. For me, being my age group, it was Kiss Alive that made an impact on me. What was Kiss Alive? 1975. Even though I didn't actually buy records until 1977, that was the first time I actually bought music. But I don't know. To me, Kiss Alive was there was something about that record because the versions on it so completely destroyed the studio versions of those songs. Like, that record broke Kiss. Now, granted, we know that Made in Japan is a monumental live record, one of the all-time classics, but it's not the record that made the band. You know what I mean? Kiss Alive actually broke the band the same way that Frampton Comes Alive broke Frampton. So, I don't know. To me, it's Kiss Alive, too, not just for the time period for me, but for the impact it had and how it kind of set the tone for all other bands that, like, the live record could break you. You know what I mean? If you are a great live band and you've never captured your sound in the studio, that like kind of led the way for others.
You know, obviously I think Deep Purple Made in Japan was a sort of cornerstone record when it comes to live albums. But for me, you know, you're saying kind of Kiss kicked off your interest in live records and really, you know, made a huge impact commercially and changed the band's perception.
Well, yeah, not only that, but just, and maybe, Derek, maybe I'm just going off topic here, but not only that, but to me, I think most of the world cites Kiss Alive, like, I think bands in the industry use that as an example of a band just breaking from a live record. Deep Purple didn't break from Made in Japan. They were already huge. But Kiss was a band that was like, you know, was not connecting until Kiss Alive came along. Same way that Frampton was not connecting until Frampton Comes Alive. So I could be wrong, but to me, Kiss was the first record that showed everybody that the live record could be the means to break the band.
I think it's interesting. You have a very American perspective, but Kiss in Europe meant nothing at that point, and even when that live album came out, it still meant nothing. But for Europeans, I think if you really want to know what the records were that kind of were the sort of, you know, the markers, were Thin Lizzy, UFO, and to a degree, I guess. No, I think those two really, you know, or Led Zeppelin, but that really wasn't. That was a soundtrack. But I think Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous, and UFO. I forgot what it's called actually.
Strangers in the Night.
Strangers in the. Thank you. And also,
yeah, no, those are all, Derek. Those are all monumental records, but it's like Deep Purple. In other words, Kiss went from like unknowns to huge in America from that record. Whereas as great as Live and Dangerous was, or UFO, or the other records you're citing, these bands were already a force. I mean, those live records were amazing. They helped propel the band, but they did not break the bands the way Kiss Alive broke them overnight here in America. That's the only difference.
Sure. You've got to understand that Kiss Alive, before Kiss they meant nothing, and after Kiss Alive they meant nothing in Europe.
Right.
But hey, we're just splitting hairs here.
I see what Monte's saying, because as a kid growing up in Los Angeles, there was definitely Kiss Alive was the first time I heard of Kiss. When Rock and Roll All Night was a radio hit, it was from a live album. And that was the first time they were on the radio. People started talking about them. Before that, especially on the West Coast, not too many people knew about Kiss. But that live album, after that came out, everyone knew about it.
I'll just insert a little interesting Kiss Alive tidbit here. Whenever you want to hear any of those early Kiss songs, you don't play the versions on the first three records. You play the versions on Kiss Alive. But when you want to hear songs from Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun, you don't play the Alive 2 versions. You play the studio versions. Yes. And that's because Kiss learned, they learned how to be a band in the studio, starting with Destroyer.
Yeah.
So the studio versions are much superior to Kiss Alive 2, which is not a very good sounding record to begin with. Not talking about the performances, but it just sonically doesn't hold up to Kiss Alive 1.
Well, funny enough, when I first bought Kiss Alive, or got to hear it, or stole it, or whatever, I thought, there's something wrong with the record, because there was these like pops every now and again in between in the tracks or between the tracks.
Firecrackers,
but it's only late. Yeah, it's only later I realised it was explosions and firecrackers.
Yeah.
I was like thinking, I should take this record back and change it.
It's funny.
Hey, you know what? It's crazy some of the silly things we did when we were kids. For example, a friend of mine bought the first Black Sabbath record on 8-track, and we saw the invisible, the fake titles on it.
Yes.
And he actually returned it to the store because he thought they were missing songs. I mean, as a teenager, I used to say Ted Nugent. I used to not know how to say Tony Iommi. I'd say Tommy Lamy or Tony Lamy or something. Whatever. We could just endlessly make fun of our teenage selves.
No, I make fun of you.
When I first heard Aerosmith, Dream On the radio, I thought it was a guy's name, Aerosmith, like Jethro Tull. But, going back to the live albums, the double live for me, it depended. You just mentioned two of my favorite live albums, Strangers of the Night and Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy. The double live, everyone raves about Made in Japan or even Rainbow on Stage. As great as they are, as great as they sounded, as a kid, I was so disappointed getting 5 or 6 songs on a double live album. And that really bummed me out to hear a whole side of Mistreated or a whole side of, Dazed and Confused from Zeppelin. And I thought I wasn't getting my money's worth.
I got to agree with you on that one, Bob. I always feel cheated, like when you listen to a record like Rainbow on Stage and what is Catch the Rainbow full side or some bullshit like that. Like, I want action. I want to hear songs. Deep Purple were guilty of that too.
Yeah.
Who the fuck needs a 20-minute version of Space Truckin'? You know
Mule.
what? Give me the meat and potatoes. Give me the songs. I don't give a shit about the jams. First of all, I'm not a musician. So, hearing musicians endlessly jam on songs live doesn't appeal to me. I understand that if you're there at the show watching it, it's a different, it's definitely more appealing to be there watching the jams. But to sit at home and hear like a 25-minute version of Space Truckin', it's just, you know what? I'd rather have 4 or 5 songs, So I totally agree, Bob. I always hated live records that had like 4 or 5 songs with these extended jams.
Back in the day, bands like Deep Purple and Rainbow and whoever, the whole point was that they wanted to display or show off their instrumental prowess. So so they were cramming as much jamming on the record as they could possibly do. So everybody's I guess when Peter Frampton, when Frampton Comes Alive came out, I think the emphasis shifted from jamming to songs.
Well, wait a minute. Kiss Alive was all songs. That was 1975. Frampton Comes Alive was 76 or 77.
No, it came out around the same time, I think.
No, look, I don't mind a jam or two. It's just when you play the average Deep Purple live record, every fucking song's a jam. It's like, just play the song. You know what? Give me like Woman from Tokyo and the song Fireball and the song Fools and all this great shit. Like, I could have 5 songs like that instead of a 25-minute Space Truckin'. I just don't need it. I'm totally there with you, Bob. It's just self-indulgent wank.
Yeah, I actually prefer Made in Europe to Made in Japan. I think Made in Europe is a very underrated album by Deep Purple.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
But thank God you didn't mention, what was that final live album they had? Last concert in Japan.
With Tommy Bolin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was an abortion.
Yeah. I think that was only out on a Japanese import here in the States.
There's barely any guitar on it. Like, Tommy had injured his arms. Most
horrible.
of what you're hearing on that record is just John Lord filling in, trying to like distort his keyboards and make it sound like a guitar. That's an awful record.
Yeah.
But there's been millions of Deep Purple live records over the years. I mean, they're one of these bands that seemingly, it seems like one day just about every concert they ever played is going to be documented somehow.
Yeah.
So they're, and they're, by the way, we were talking about Made in Europe. There's an expanded version of Made in Europe that came out, on one of these recent Deep Purple live records. I think it's Live in Graz or Graz. I don't know how you say it, Graz. And apparently that is taken from the same set of shows as Made in Europe, and it's got way more songs on it. So that is one really fun thing. I don't know if this was on your list to talk about, guys, but the whole idea of, live records that have been expanded, because so many records these days, like even a record like Black Oak, Arkansas, Runch and Roll Live, which I believe was a single back in the day, did get expanded to a double. I think you're seeing that with a lot of single live records that have been expanded to doubles. It happens endlessly. And of course, Derek and I are just praying for the day that Foghat Live gets expanded, although I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No, I've spoken with the last remaining member of Foghat, live.
Roger Earl.
He's been trying to get Warner's to, in fact it's Warner's to allow him to go get the tapes and see what he can do with it, but they've blocked him.
Wow.
So I can't believe it. It's horrible.
What a shame. What an awful shame.
Because I know Rhino reissued their stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Rhino.
Well, Rhino's notorious for that. I mean, the expanded Runch and Roll was on Rhino. I mean, Rhino were the kings at mining the vaults to put out that, things that people want to hear, even if it's in a limited edition like on that Handmade series. So there must be a good reason why Rhino would be stopping that from happening or not pushing it forward. I really don't. Yeah. It's just kind of mind-boggling.
I spoke to Roger Earl, like you and I guess Bob. Is that I said to him the greatest disappointment in my life was getting the Foghat Live album and finding it was just a single album, single LP, and not a double. And
why was it put out as a single back then? Do you know?
Well, I mean, he just said, "Oh, we wanted to do a double, but the record company just said, "Oh no, let's keep it to a single, guys."
Well, keep in mind, though, I'm sure pricing was an issue back then, and maybe the label felt Foghat weren't big enough to sustain, the price tag of a double record. It was probably $1 more or $2 more.
The thing is, the history of double lives, if like as you said, with stuff like Humble Pie's Rock and Fillmore, and and for example, you named something else, but they actually rejuvenated or help the band to go onto a better level, a bigger level.
Right.
The cool thing about the single live albums, especially Foghat Live, is it just rips your face off from beginning to end. There's no fillers. There's no real extended songs on it. You take that album, you take Judas Priest Unleashed in the East, or what's another, AC/DC, If You Want Blood. It's start to finish, kick-ass. There's no kind of fillers, no kind of audience participation, and that's kind of cool in that sense.
Yeah, I know, I agree. There's nothing, you can't argue with, the idea of just a concentrated punch in the face.
Yeah.
Would Unleash in the East have been as good if it was 2 records? Who knows?
That's an interesting question, and I don't think it would have been, because, as Bob said, those records that he mentioned were just a total assault on your senses, and if you did it over 2 records, you'd be, you just wouldn't appreciate it as much.
Yeah. But the thing is, one thing about both of those records is, I don't have them in front of me, but I recall, AC/DC and Priest each being like 8, 9-song records. It just happens that Foghat Live is 6 songs, so it really feels. It doesn't even feel like a full single live record. You still feel cheated on that record.
Yeah, but each song's about 6 minutes long.
Yeah, that's true.
Another good single live album rarely gets talked about is Derringer Live. Rick Derringer Live.
Oh,
that's
you know what?
Kick-ass album.
I'm gonna pick you up on that, Bob, because I don't know if you've ever heard. There was a live promo record that I think Blue Sky or Columbia or whatever he was signed to released about the same time.
At the Whiskey, right? Was it?
And it was much better.
David Ted's actually said that to me. Yeah, I agree. I think that was a radio promo that they did. Yeah. I agree, but I'm just saying for a guy that's been known in America as more of a pop rock icon of the 70s, that is a kick-ass live album here in Beyond the Universe. And Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo with the guitar solos. I do agree that the promo is better, but the song selection is definitely kick-ass for a single album.
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that if you're an aficionado, you'd almost certainly agree once you've heard both records that the promo is the better record. And I think somebody's reissued that promo actually as a bonus disc to the regular album.
So before we continue, I got to mention, Derek, now you have been working on a proper book about
Yeah.
classic live albums. You want to talk about that a bit?
In between gigs for me means jobs. I had some downtime, so I decided to write about double live albums, only double live albums, and it's called. The book is going to be called, or is called, Double Live, and it's the history of double live albums from 1970 to 1980. And I've chosen that period because it's the golden era, of vinyl records and gatefold sleeves and the whole 9 yards in terms of the presentation. And I started to collate how many records there were over that time, and I've gone up to just over 200. But subsequent, when I finished this record when I finished this book in about 1997 or 8, there were over 200 records that I'd found out about. There was no internet back then, by the way, so you just had to kind of know or just ask people. But subsequent to that, I found a stack load more. At least like 20 or 30 more. So, I'm going from really big acts to very, very obscure acts, and also every country in the world. I mean, for example, I'm just looking here, and I've got Eagles Live, Bob Dylan at Budokan, and then I switched to the next one is a band called Eloy.
German band, yeah.
Yeah, a German band, and they did a double live German record. Which is incredible heavy prog, and so on and so forth. So it's just I couldn't find a publisher, and I still haven't. Somehow I've got to get this book out, but I'm so busy with my other stuff I'm doing that I haven't been able to address it properly. But I'd love to get it out because I think all of us would love this book. A lot of work. It's quite a tome, as they call it.
Well, you need to add in kind of finish it now before it came out with these new records you've discovered since.
Or issue it as is and then do a follow-up, like an expanded version.
You're already planning the remaster, and the original one's not even out yet.
But some of my favourite records aren't necessarily favourite double live albums. And by the way, I'm going to do a single live book as well following this if it ever comes out. It's all written. There's I don't know how many words, 200-300.
Oh, the single live book's written too?
No. The double live is written and is ready to go. But the single live, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to follow up the double live with a single live book. But I need to get this out first, I guess. But what I was going to say is some of my favourite double live albums aren't necessarily hard rock, and I'm thinking here, I'm just looking at my list of stuff here, and there's the Little Feat album, Waiting for Columbus. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, fantastic.
That's a great record. I mean, really, I just love stuff like that. When and there's an album by a guy called Lee Michaels who did the double live. And that is a tremendous recording, number one. Number two, it's just a fantastic, vibey live album. The recording quality is incredible.
Well, let's go the other way and ask you guys, what were some of your most disappointing live albums that came out in the 70s?
Okay. Well,
I'd have to think about that one.
Well, I can tell you one off the bat, which you may or may not agree with, but Aerosmith live bootleg.
That's what I was thinking there. I agree. Yeah. That's my choice too.
Absolutely, that was my choice.
It's absolutely abysmal. I don't know what they were thinking. They were trying to make it, I guess, like a bootleg.
Right.
But what was the point? It was just a horrible, horrible record as far as I'm concerned.
It just sounds sloppy. It's not sonically, it's not great. It sounds sloppy. Ironically, the two best songs on there are the ones that are taken from Paul's Mall in 1973, A Mother Popcorn and I Ain't Got You. The sound quality is much better on those. The performance is better. Plus, they were like super rare for us fans back then. Like, if you may not like that record, but you want to buy it just for those live versions from Paul's Mall. I thought that was the only saving grace on it. But yeah, I was let down, and I was the biggest Aerosmith fan in the world in 1978.
Yeah.
And from day one, I just never really loved that record. I would say one of the, I guess this is a little bit of an aside, because I think we'd probably have trouble thinking of more records like Live Bootleg, because there really weren't that many that were just duds. But I can say that the biggest disappointment of all is that we never got a Sabbath double live in the 70s. All we got later was that, basically a bootleg, Live at Last, which was good. I mean, it was like kind of on par with Live Bootleg by Aerosmith, like
production-wise it sucked, yeah.
Production-wise was probably, it still probably beat Live Bootleg. I mean, I was happy with it when it came out, and I think people in the 70s would have been happy with it if it was the only thing that came out. But yeah, it's just kind of too bad we never had a classic double live record from Sabbath in the 70s.
I agree. Well, they did remaster and remix it and added some songs to it, and it's released as, I forgot the name of it.
Past Lives.
Yeah, Past Lives. But yeah, the original, I remember getting that as an import, spending a lot of money on it, and very disappointed.
Yeah, even the cover sucked. I mean, it's basically a bootleg.
What about Nazareth, Snaz, 1981? They were never a great live band. I mean, compared to
I thought they were a great live band. It's just, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with Snaz other than it was recorded, when the band was like softening and they had extra guys. Like, I think Snaz is perfectly fine for capturing that lineup of Nazareth. I think what's disappointing about it was that it's not the classic Nazareth when they were heavier. I think that's what you're saying, Bob, because the record itself is totally fine for what it is.
I've got one for you that I think it's quite controversial in terms of how it was received and how it's perceived now. Blue Oyster Cult, On Your Feet or On Your Knees. What's your opinion of that record?
I love no problem with the performances. I just think it's like flat. It's just not a good mix. It's just kind of cheap, thin sounding. So I'm talking about the sonics of it only, not the performances. What was your issue, Derek?
My issue with it was exactly the same reason. The production quality was just abysmal. But, that goes for most of those early Blue Oyster Cult albums produced by Sandy Pearlman. They have no dynamics at all. And that record comes across as a real flat-sounding non-entity.
Yeah. I mean, look at Some Enchanted Evening a few years later, which was a single, sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that was the album I remember. I was never a big BOC fan, but I knew the songs from Some Enchanted Evening, so that was the go-to live album for BOC for me. Right.
I would agree with that. Now, what's your opinion of, and I think this is similar for me to the Blue Oyster Cult album, what's your opinion of The Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin?
Monte?
You know what? I did not mind it. When I got it, I was a teenager when I got it in 1978. I didn't have any issues with the record back then, but at the same time, I wasn't mature enough to really assess it and kind of to have the grand overview. And I know that record is, looked down upon as a misstep or non-ideal. And people look at that Live in the West record or whatever it's called, the record that came out.
How the West Was Won.
How the West Was Won, yes, right. Yes. People look, I mean, come on, that's a vastly superior record, not just sonically, but it's 2 discs, 2 CDs, so you get way more songs. You get Black Dog and all this shit that you wanted to be on Song Remains the Same. But what I do love about Song Remains the Same is that does Rock and Roll open that record?
Yeah.
Now, the live version of Rock and Roll is like unrecognizable from that like honky-tonk fun party version on Led Zeppelin 4. On Song Remains the Same, that thing's like a fucking heavy metal beast.
True.
It's a completely different feel than the studio version, which I love, by the way. I like the fact that it's just kind of been reimagined and sounds different.
I was disappointed at first because I got the record and saw the movie when it came out, and I didn't realize till later that it was recorded on the Houses of the Holy tour, because I remember buying it going, why isn't Kashmir on it? Why isn't Wonton Song? Yeah. Why isn't, as songs from Presence on here? Then going back, I'm just going, God, the song selection sucks. Like you say, there's no Black Dog, and then you have a 20-minute version of Whole Lotta Love, which you didn't need.
Yeah.
Moby Dick, 20 minutes long. No Quarter, which I never liked. is like 20 minutes long. You know, it's pointless. But I do agree that the live versions of like Rock and Roll and Celebration Day and
Celebration Day too crushes.
Absolutely.
You know, so I guess I don't have an issue. Like right now, most people seem to have an issue with that record is just not being great performances or not idealized Led Zeppelin. That's not really my issue. I think that record falls down for me more like what you're saying, Bob, just because it doesn't have enough songs on it, too much jamming, missing all these great songs. I think that's my main problem with it, not that the performances aren't as good as, Live in the West, when the West was won.
Yeah, I agree. What about, let me go through a list of stuff. I know one of your favorites, Double Live Gonzo, Ted Nugent.
Yeah, I think it's everybody's favorite.
I can't really comment on that. I have to be honest. That's not a record I ever spent a ton of time with. I don't know. I remember it being also noisy and a little flat sounding.
You're right.
I don't remember it ever having great production, and I think that's kind of why I just shied away from it and stuck with the studio records. So I can't really comment. You guys tell me.
I thought there were some throwaway songs there's stuff like Yank Me, Crank Me, and a couple others that were just kind of lame, but Stranglehold Live and Great White Buffalo, obviously. There were some gems on that, for sure.
You know what I liked? There's that song, Yank Me, Crank Me.
I didn't care
I
about
always liked it. I'm not talking about that song in particular, but I always loved it when bands gave you new songs on live records.
Right.
Like Black Oak, Arkansas, Launch Roll. Most of the record are unreleased songs, and you're hearing them live for the first time. Same way you did, Ted Nugent did an entire record like that called Intensities in 10 Cities, which was a fantastic concept. So, yeah, I love when live records give you songs that you can't get elsewhere. Or even on Double Live Gonzo, you're hearing the Ted Nugent band do Great White Buffalo, which is previously only an Amboy Duke song. For so many Nugent fans, that was their first time they got to hear the song because they didn't know about the Tooth, Fang, and Claw record. It was before Ted Nugent broke. So I just think that's a cool thing when bands don't give you the typical and they use the live records to throw in a few unreleased songs, like 2 or 3. I think that's perfect.
Songs like Great White Buffalo and the other, centerpiece of his early years is represented on the record, a track called Hibernation.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately for me, it's all very meandering, especially when he was coming, he was really coming into his own with tracks like Stormtroopin' and I get Cat Scratch Fevers on there and Motor City Madhouse. But, there's this weird, kind of clash between the old stuff and the new stuff, and I'm not so sure it really works.
Well, I mean, are you just talking about Hibernation only?
No, I'm talking about, I'm talking about that and Great White Buffalo.
Yeah, but Great White Buffalo is one of his classic songs. What's wrong with that live version?
Yeah, but then there's, but it's not as concise as, say, just what the Doctor ordered or,
yeah. Well, but then again, Derek, it's only 2 songs. I mean, they're not these, long jams. I mean, Hibernation goes on for a while because it is an instrumental, but I don't know. It's not like those records. I don't know. For me, they don't hurt. It's only 2 songs.
You have a major drawback of the record, although, I love it. It is the production by Lou Futterman. I mean, it's just so flat. And I think, Lou Futterman should have produced Blue Oyster Cult because it's in the same ballpark.
I've never spent a lot of time with either record, Gonzo or On Your Feet or On Your Knees. Same with Kiss Alive, too.
What about Grand Funk? They did a 1970 live album, and of course, Caught in the Act in 75. What's your opinions on those?
Well, I'll start out with live album. I have to say that through most of my years as a Grand Funk fan, I always looked down on live album. I thought you could barely hear the vocals in the opening track. Yeah. I just thought it was too low rent, too underproduced. And then I kind of had an epiphany a few years ago where I just cranked the shit out of it one night, and I just realized I had it all wrong. If you're looking at a record for something to be a raw, primal document of that day, it just kind of hit me how amazing that record was. It took me to just focus on it and stop thinking about what was wrong with it or things I couldn't hear, and just think about what the band's goals were, which is to just make something that represented the night. Shouldn't be pretty. It shouldn't be cleaned up. It's just raw as fuck. I mean, to me, that's like one of the most primal live records of all time. I've totally changed my opinion on it. I think it's fucking amazing. But I didn't think that for many years.
What about Caught in the Act?
What do you think about it with that one, Derek? Live album.
I like it way better than the first album, the first live album.
Caught in the Act?
But
Nah.
It's a better album for me.
Well, it's a much better recording. You know, it's very high fidelity, but, you know, it's kind of like what we were saying with Nazareth. You know, like Snaz is like capturing Nazareth after their peak when they had softened up and gone commercial. Same thing with Caught in the Act. That's not the real Grand Funk. Like live album is where it's at on Grand Funk. And like I said, the production it may be raw as hell, but it's not flat like Double Live Gonzo or On Your Feet or On Your Knees.
I think the great misconception about Grand Funk Railroad was the fact that, you know, people perceived them as a heavy metal band, but they weren't really. They were more a soul band, if anything.
Yeah,
so,
yep. I
think a lot of people came to the record or their records with a completely different mindset, thinking they were going to be Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath.
Yeah, no, they never wanted to be those bands. Like you said, they had like a soul Motown side to them, the same way bands like 10 Years After and Cream were like heavy metal bands that were bringing, you know, jazz into things, you know, jazz influence. But yeah, that's important. Grand Funk are not a heavy metal band. They never wanted to be.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned 10 Years After, because I was listening to that recorded live album, the 73 album. That's another great live album. Very underrated.
Yes.
Good Morning, Little Schoolgirl.
Yeah,
Give
but
Me
no,
Your
I agree.
Lovin'.
But they do get a little. That's another band. Like, you know, a lot of these
Like
bands
Deep
just get a
Purple.
little too jammy. I'd
Yeah,
rather
they
have
do.
less jams and more songs. Same
True.
thing for that. But that is a great record, and I love the live version of One of These Days.
Yeah.
I
Great
think
production,
the opening
too.
track.
And again,
But it's weird because, you know, it's kind of like one thing that, you know, recorded live by 10 Years After, it did kind of come out, even though Space and Time was a really big record for those guys, it still was kind of after their peak. You know, they had changed to something more commercial and a little bit mellower. It was like past their blues boom peak when that record was made. Another one that I would compare that to is Jethro Tull, Bursting Out. Another classic live record, but, you know, Bursting Out comes from their folk period.
Yeah.
You know, like, it wasn't recorded like on the Aqualung tour or back in the heavier days. So it's, you know, to me, recorded live and Jethro and Bursting Out, amazing as they are two records that came out, you know, that should have been recorded like 2-3 years earlier when the band were truly peaking. Even though they're both fantastic records and they're both live documents of fantastic records. I mean, my favorite 10 Years After record is Space and Time, even though it was like kind of after their peak.
Right.
And one of my favorite Tull records is
Aqualung.
well, no, the songs from the Wood. You know, when that
wow.
live record was recorded. Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I'm obsessed with the folk period of Tull.
Yeah, no. I mean, Tull was great all around, but, you know, it's interesting with the prog records because the live albums, to me, were too much like the studio records. They were too clean. You could go through Kansas, Two for the Show, Yes songs, you know, Jethro Tull, Genesis, Seconds Out, Bebop Deluxe, Live in the Air Age, and even a lot of the Rush albums like Exit Stage Left. That's why I prefer All the World's a Stage much better, much more raw. It sounds like a live album. You know, do you agree?
I gotta go back to All the World's a Stage, but I kind of recall that having the Gonzo On Your Feet syndrome, like flat sounding recording.
It is flat. It is flat.
Yeah.
But having said that, it contains, like Blue Oyster Cult, it contains some of their greatest songs from that early period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of listen to the record and you go, oh, you know, if only this was a better recording, but it's got great material on.
No, but that's important, Derek, is I know that we're spending a lot of time here we're kind of negging on Gonzo, we're negging on Agents just for the sonics. But look, nobody's complaining about the performances on those records. I mean, or All the World's a Stage. And ultimately, all those records that we're talking about are highly successful classic records because of the material, because of the performances, and it's kind of like it overrides the fact that they're shitty recordings. But then you have a record like Kiss Alive, which is a fantastic recording. It just makes it so much better when the sonics are pleasing.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then you just got to overlook it and just concentrate on the performances, because that's what it's about. Like you look at the MC5 record, Kick Out the Jams. That's like one of the noisiest recordings ever. I had to play that record 4 or 5 times just to kind of figure out the song structures and what the hell was going on, because it's just so noisy. But one of the greatest records ever. So I think you got to just kind of put the production aside and deal with the more important issue, which is the songs.
I think for all us three, having worked in the business for some time, we kind of listen to things, with a different ear to when we were younger. And when we were listening to things younger, we weren't really thinking about production or engineering or mixing. We were actually just into the music. And it's only later, for me, when you start listening to these records, you think, oh, this production's terrible, this is flat, this isn't really coming together, and you have a different take on it.
Yep. Well, Derek, wait, look at Status Quo Live. I mean, that's not a great sounding record either.
No. Funnily enough, when that record was recorded, the American company just wanted to remix it, and it never came out. The remix never came out, and I don't even know if that it still exists in the vault somewhere. But they wanted to remix that record because they felt the same way.
You know what it is? It just seems like we're mentioning a lot of records from the 70s here that just kind of sound flat. And you know what it is? All these records we're talking about, they just don't have real low end. There's no subs. There's no real bottom in the recordings. There's no sub information, and that's why we're calling them flat. And that makes such a huge difference. You listen to Some Enchanted Evening, it's got real low end. You listen to On Your Feet or On Your Knees, there's no bottom. I mean, you hear the bass guitar, but there's no bottom from the bass guitar, or there's no kick drums. I think that's really what it is. It's as simple as just not missing sub-information on a lot of these records.
Well, I think that's why a lot of people complain about a lot of live record recordings. A lot of it was done in the studio, they say, with certain stuff. But I think that's basically just to fix up, because you didn't have the technology back then, obviously. But you listen to something like, you say, Aerosmith live bootleg. Some purists say, well, that's great because it's done totally live. But it sounds like a bootleg, So I get it. Sometimes with the production and overdubs, if something isn't sounding right in the live recording, you don't want to put that out to the public, obviously. So I really have no issues with
the three records that sound really, really great and register on my all-time top 10 or top 5 records, actually, live records, are Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East.
Yep.
UFO, Strangers in the Night, and Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. Now,
my top 3 right there.
Yeah, all 3 of those records have been criticised because there was rumours for years that those records were tampered with in the studio afterwards. So
I can't comment on UFO, Derek, but I do believe that much of Live and Dangerous was tweaked and tampered with, from what I've read and heard. But I can tell you that's bullshit on Unleashed in the East. I sat down for breakfast with Tom Allam, or Tom Allam, as you say, Derek. I sat with the guy, with him and Andy Sneap when Judas Priest played, and I asked him specifically about Unleashed in the East, and it is completely live. The only stuff that they overdubbed were much of Rob Halford's vocals were overdubbed due to technical issues. And in fact, they recorded the vocals sitting on the outside porch at John Lennon's estate, Tittenhurst? I think it's in Tittenhurst. Or it's called. So the vocals were overdubbed outdoors while they were overlooking the field. And that is the only thing that was changed. And it was only changed not because Halford didn't perform it right. It was just there were technical issues with how it was recorded. But everything else is live on that record. And in fact, if you look on the Wikipedia page for that record, everything I just said from Tom's mouth is also word for word how it's depicted on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So I think I think the Unleashed in the East thing is just a bad rumor. I think the problem is the record just sounds so fucking good. Like Tom did such an amazing job on the mix.
Absolutely.
That people can't believe it's really live, so they have to make up these stories that it just it sounds too good, it can't be live.
Well, I've got bootlegs from that tour, and they sound just as great as far as performance-wise. And Halford's hitting every note on Victim of Changes and Genocide, so they definitely perform brilliantly live.
Right.
So, but it's funny, you mentioned those 3 albums, and they're my top 3 live albums. And this is something Monte and I always argue with Martin Popoff, is the performance is so much better, is so much livelier on Unleashed in the East, Strangers in the Night, Live and Dangerous, than on the studio records. It just has so much more energy and so much more balls to the studio versions. And I just think the bands really are able to let loose live, whereas in the studio, they've got a producer overlooking them and a record company wanting that hit song, so everything has to be more polished and more confined. Whereas these live records, to me, it sounds like the definitive versions of these songs. If you listen to Strangers in the Night or Unleashed in the East, do you agree?
Oh, I love, everything on UFO, Strangers in the Night, is incredible. It's way better than the original recordings.
Absolutely.
Yes, same thing with Kiss Alive too. The album Kiss Alive. I mean,
it was a successful recording and a release because of that mere fact. They sounded much more electric and much more, alive. Not to use a pun, but than the studio records.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt if a band just makes a definitive live record where they nail it, that it's going to destroy the studio versions because it's got, they're playing off the energy of the audience, they're playing off the energy of each other, there's adrenaline pumping because it's live, and also they've been able to work these songs up. Like, listen to the first songs on the first 3 Kiss albums. When you hear the versions on a live, they're on fire. When you go and you listen to studio versions of those songs, it sounds like the band's like on downers or something. Everything's so slow and so tame and... or like the versions on of Sad Wings of Destiny, those live songs that made it to Unleashed in the East. By the way, there is a criticism about Unleashed in the East that they're playing too fast. Some of it's just a little too hyped up. But you listen to Sad Wings of Destiny, and it just sounds like your turntable is like at the wrong speed. It's just so fucking slow and lethargic.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Martin Popoff's problem is with live albums, but like with many things, he's wrong. Martin loves to be the contrarian and just throw shit out there just to kind of elicit a response.
I don't think he does it deliberately. I think he believes.
Oh, he does.
No, you're right.
He does. Yeah.
It sells him short to say he's doing it just to fuck with people. He truly does believe all these wacky things he says. He really does.
He's more of a perfectionist, and a lot of people, they love the studio works of bands. They want that perfection. They don't want a slightly out-of-tune guitar or something that you can't hear the toms as well. So I get that aspect of it, but the energy level, I mean, you listen to the songs I'll Force It from UFO and compare it to the live versions on Strangers. There's no comparison to me, energy-wise.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
All 3 records were overseen and produced, I guess, in commas, in parentheses, by really, really class record producers at the time. Eddie Kramer,
Ron Nevison,
and what's his name?
Tony Visconti, or
that was Visconti. That's what led him to doing. I guess he went right from Bad Reputation into that, right?
Yeah. But I knew Tony quite well in New York, and I asked him questions about Live and Dangerous. He was absolutely adamant that a lot of it was done. There were lots of overdubs in the studio. So but a lot of the band members rubbished that. But they were on so many drugs at the time that who knows what.
You know what? The bottom line is, I could give a flying fuck how real or fake they are, as long as I'm loving what I'm hearing. That's all that matters,
Yeah.
Who cares? It doesn't matter to me. I don't have any issues of authenticity. I just want it to sound great.
It's not like the bands couldn't perform it live. It was more of a technical issue that they had to do the overdub. I know
But
Michael Schenker.
It's a pride thing with bands, though. You know, bands they don't want you to think it's overdubbed or tinkered with. That's a pride thing for musicians.
Of course.
I get it. But as a listener, I really don't care.
What do you guys think of Pat Travers' Go For What You Know live?
Love it. I don't like the song selection
fantastic.
as much, but the energy on that album is just unbelievable.
Yeah, totally.
I agree. It's such a shame that Pat, Travers never really cracked it, and has always been on the periphery. With a record like that, he had the talent, that's for sure.
I wish he put Life in London on that record, though. There are a couple songs that I would have loved to have heard live on that. But, Boom Boom Out Goes the Lights was his biggest radio hit. And that was from, again, you talk about a song that was never released he never released it in the studio, did he? It was just for the live album, right?
Yeah, just for the live album.
Yeah.
One of my favorite records, single live albums, and the recording quality is amazing, actually. And I don't think it was really particularly produced. Is Sammy Hagar, All Night Long?
Yeah.
Derek, I never heard that record until you recently reissued it on Rock Candy. And I think I emailed you after I played it, but I was blown away with that record. Oh, my God. I'm like, how have I never heard this? It's just, to me, it's the seminal Sammy Hagar recording. Probably the best Hagar thing ever. That record. It's fantastic.
I agree.
It's not produced as we know it. It's just recorded.
Guys, what about Frampton Comes Alive? I mean, just to tell you how great that record is, take any song on that record, especially Show Me the Way, and try and listen to the studio version of it, because, we all know the live versions. We know every, second of the live versions. But put the studio versions on, and it's just like, you hear it, and you're like, wow. It's just sucks. Sucks, Pretty amazing.
What do you think about Uriah Heep live from 73? Classic double album.
I've got not very good things to say about that. Monte, what do you think?
What's funny is that's another live record by one of my favorite bands that I just never spent a lot of time with. The only thing I remember about that record, Derek, is I do remember the Sonics. Sonically, I remember it being rich sounding and sonically great.
Yeah, I gotta say,
it's not a flat recording at all, from what I remember.
Certain songs, like you listen to Gypsy, the dynamics on that song, Gypsy Live, the beginning, fucking unbelievable. It just sounds so heavy and so beefy. But yeah, all in all, not a fantastic live album, but it definitely has.
Yeah, why is that? Derek, what's your issue with it? Because I've never heard what the problem was.
I think for me, it's just I didn't think the production or the recording quality, I should say, rather than production, was top notch. I think it's good, but not great. And also, there's a whole lot of jamming going on it with some old rock and roll songs, which last for an eternity. And I'm thinking, well, why do I need to hear this? Why can't we get more of of Heap's studio stuff? So I think I don't know. For some reason, my view of it is tainted over the years.
It does end with the rock and roll medley. I mean, that is. Look, the thing is that these guys, if you look their era, they grew up on Chuck Berry and all the rock and roll stuff. So, the same way like Angus Young is into these dudes, and Alvin Lee. These guys are like, they're influenced by rock and roll. And I think as teenagers, it's pretty hard for us to relate to that. Like, I never had any fucking interest in the rock and roll medley. I'm like, what is this shit? But I think now if I listen to it, of course, now that I'm older and I appreciate rock and roll and who these artists were, I'd probably be into it more now than I was back then. But yeah, as a teenager, I just couldn't stomach the rock and roll medley. And I think it ended the record, or was like at least almost a full side,
Yes. I don't know. It's a disappointment on par with ZZ Top's, what was that? What was that one?
Yeah, Fandango had wasn't almost half of it was like rock, stuff like that.
The one side, yeah.
And it was like rock and roll medleys as well. And I'm just thinking, why do that?
Well, that bugged me about Scorpion's Tokyo tapes too. Why did they put Long Tall Sally on it? Yeah. It was like, that's another album. I love the songs on it. Something about that album It just doesn't resonate with me. That live Scorpions album, Tokyo Tapes.
Oh, I love that. That's, by the way, that is sonically one of the greatest sounding live records ever. That thing sounds immaculate.
Monte, can I just ask you to put down the crack pipe?
What, you don't think it sounds good, Tokyo Tapes?
Well, no. In a word, no.
I'm shocked. Every time I put it on, I hear a great mix. I hear low end. I hear separation. I like the drum tones. I think that record sounds great.
Okay, you have an opinion.
And you and I agree on most of this stuff, so I'm surprised. Like one of us is completely wrong here.
Well, maybe not wrong, but we just have a different opinion.
I gotta side with Derek. I don't know.
Wait, you can't say that record sounds flat. No fucking way.
I'm not. I didn't say that. Did I say it?
No, but that's the common complaint when we're talking about live records is it's flat. So what's sonically wrong with that one then?
I just don't think it. I just don't think it explodes for me in the way that we're talking about. You know, Unleashed in the East or Strangers in the Night. It just doesn't. It doesn't grab me.
Right. So you're talking about a performance and energy level. That's what you're referring to.
To a degree, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, guys, I was never a huge Scorpion fan as a teenager. I only became into the Scorpions later, so I was, that was not a live record I spent a lot of time with, so I'll defer to you on that one.
And it was produced, I think, by Dieter Dirks as well, that live album.
Yeah, it was.
So, and he did some great work, obviously, with the band later on.
Well, I think maybe it was overproduced. Like, it almost sounds a bit like a studio record. It doesn't have that live feel to me.
Yes, I would agree with that.
What do you think of, let me throw you a couple other live albums. Frank Marino, live from 78, and Robin Trower, live.
I'm into the Marino because I thought that, we talk about this a lot, is, you read about Marino being so influenced by Hendrix, and at least the Mahogany Rush records I'm talking about, they're just never as heavy as you want them to be. There's like guitar synth and all this shit on it, and like, I want to hear heavy Frank Marino, and I remember the live record sounding a whole lot heavier by miles than any of the studio records that stuff comes from. Do I have that right, Derek? I know you know that stuff better than me.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, Marino's early material or mid-period material was tainted by his use of synths, and I don't know, it never really hit the spot for me. Although I really appreciated his guitar playing and his whole vibe. But when it comes to the double live, it wasn't a double, it was a single live album.
Yeah.
And there were two. A little while later, he released a record called Juggernaut, which is a really amazing record. It's this great studio record. But the live album's great, but my criticism is it's just too much guitar soloing. I don't know if you are familiar with it.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know it like inside out.
It is a total guitar heavy record.
It just goes on and on and on forever. You can go out and make a cup of coffee and come back, and he's still playing the same solo.
What about Trower live?
Oh, great!
Awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome production and just killer songs.
Two Rolling Stone live version is one of the ultimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ending of that when it slows down. Fuck.
Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah. I love his guitar work. I love his sustain on that guitar. And people say, oh yeah, he's obviously a Hendrix clone, but you know what? It's just great. I
don't know that record inside out too much. I like it. Trower's, an artist that I got into, in the last 10 years, and it's not the same when you get into an artist as an adult. It's not the same as when you're a teenager. Like, when I was a teenager, I'd buy a record, and I would traditionally play the record anywhere from 8 to 12 times, like, pretty much every day, like for a week, week or two straight after I got it. And I'd really know that record inside out because, you didn't have a lot of records. There weren't a lot of distractions. You had the time. And now as an adult, if I get into Trower, if I get to play the live record once or twice, that's a lot. I just don't have the time to really digest the records like we did when we were kids. So, yes, I do have the Trower live record, but I probably only played it once. So I can't recall how it was.
How can you justify being on this program with Bob Nabal?
Well, you guys got to realize that, of course, being a complete legendary A&R god like I am, my time's very limited. So, 90% of all time to listen to music is spent trying to discover the next big thing for Nuclear Blast or to work with all the bands I currently have signed. So I have very little time to listen to music for pleasure and to listen to, like, you know, this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I just don't have a whole lot of time to delve into this stuff these days. I mean, literally, I have a pile. I always talk to you about this, guys, but I have a pile of 500 unopened CDs that I bought of all this stuff, and there's just not enough time in the day to listen to it. I'm gonna the pile just keeps getting big. I'm gonna die with a pile of like 1,000 CDs unplayed. So there's just no time, unfortunately.
Well, speaking of disappointing live records, what'd you think about the Alice Cooper Show album?
Oh, dreadful!
Dreadful. Why? He could have put out a killer double live record back in the day, and he just put out this schlocky record. What do you think, Monte?
I don't know that one. Wait, that's the record it's got like a live shot of him with an ogre or something.
Yeah.
I was never a big Alice Cooper fan as a youngster. It's only in the last 4 or 5 years that I've started, really learning his classics. And by the way, to me, the biggest disconnect ever in the history of Alice Cooper is I know that the School's Out record is like a classic. I played that record recently, and I think the song School's Out is probably one of the top 10 greatest songs of all time. It's fucking amazing. But I find the rest of that record to be just unlistenable. I don't get it. I can't even play that record.
I think that particular album, to me, it sounds like a contractual obligation record, in the same way as that Black Sabbath live album that came out, and also, the Ted Nugent Intensity in 10 Cities. To me, it sounds like it's filling a gap in their release schedule.
What about Queen Live Killers?
I like it.
Live album.
Not super passionate about it. You know what? For me, Queen is just such a studio band. Some bands just need the production and the polish, and I don't know. I tend to prefer the Queen studio versions to their live stuff.
Derek?
I do not like it, and I think the reason I didn't realize until a minute ago when Monte said it is because they are such a studio band. Listening to their stuff live just doesn't cut it for me. It doesn't have the same emotional depth or performance quality.
Well, here's something we didn't bring up, which a lot of people consider one of the greatest live albums of all time, Cheap Trick, live at Budokan.
Ah, yeah, we missed
Fantastic.
that. Yeah.
Nothing not to love.
Yeah.
They were great.
They were definitely a live band.
That's another band the live versions just make those studio versions just completely obsolete.
Yeah.
Might as well just wipe them off the face of the earth. They don't need to exist.
And it's interesting when, you talk about Grand Funk and other bands throughout their career when they put out 2 or 3 different live albums, or in the case of Rush, 4. Some live albums are killer. Some kind of suck, like Humble Pie. You mentioned the performance, Rockin' the Fillmore. Definitely one of the top 5 live albums, in my opinion. And then you have the live album Eat It, which kind of sucks. I mean, I thought.
Which is that one, Bob?
Eat It.
Eat It, right. Yeah. Well, Eat It's just what? Is it just half live, right? Or
it's all covers.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, but see, Humble Pie is just weird in general because that's a band. They were just, Frampton quit the band right on the eve of their breakout success, and then they actually made 1 or 2 records after Frampton, or was it just one? Smokin' was after the live record, right?
Yeah, they did a few after Frampton.
Right, but what I'm saying is Smokin' was absolutely fucking on fire, probably their best studio record. Yes. But then, starting with Eat It and Street Rats, it just all went to hell. I mean, those records suck. Yeah. The band just they just lost it overnight,
Well, a lot of groups lose it, don't they? We've had this discussion many times. For example, when you hear stuff from new stuff from Aerosmith, you're thinking, how can they possibly put this up against material from Rocks or Toys in the Attic? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Well, talk about bands that recorded live albums with all brand new songs. One of my favorites is Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies.
Right.
Yeah, well, another one is Ted Nugent Intensities in 10 Cities, which is a pretty amazing concept, which you guys know the story is he went on a tour, and in each city they would try out a new song or two and get them all recorded, and then they were able to put out a live record of just the new songs, but yet it wasn't, those songs weren't all played in one show, because you couldn't go out as Ted Nugent and just play all new songs. The audience would revolt. So I thought that was a pretty great concept. Unfortunately, the results weren't as good as the concept. It's a good record, but nothing mind-blowing. But yeah, I love records like that. Are there a lot of, besides Intensities and Band of Gypsies, and as we said before, Raunch and Roll by Black Oak is like, I believe, like 2/3 new. I don't know if there were are there a lot of other examples of that?
I can't think of any.
I mean, bands will do live songs that haven't been released yet. Like I remember when On Stage came out and Rainbow did Kill the King. I'm thinking, where did this come from? And then, of course, it came out on Long Live Rock and Roll.
Yeah. Oh, that was always fun. I mean, look, I know as a kid, I loved when there was a song on a live record that only existed on that live record. Just made it special.
Yeah.
It gave you a good reason to own that live record, to just have something different than just the live versions, So I always loved when bands did that.
Well, what do you think of Rory Gallagher's Stage Struck album?
There's two live albums from that period. Monte, you take that one.
Stage Struck was the third, right? There was Live in Europe was the first, and then Irish Tour 74 was the second.
Yeah, but that came out later, though, didn't it? Wasn't that a reissue? Or did that
might have been I know Live Tour 74 was a movie at the time, but yeah, it might have come out as a live record later. I'm not sure, but all I know is I played both of those two records recently, and Live in Europe is where it's at. That's the record. Even though Stage Struck was kind of like Rory's heavy metal phase, like he got
that's what I liked
really
about
heavy
it.
Around that period.
Yeah, the Photo Finish album and Top Priority. They're my two favorite
Top
albums.
Priority is amazing. That's
great album.
Those are his heaviest records.
Yeah, and that's why I like Stage
So
Struck.
I haven't heard Stage Struck in a while, but I'm sure it's smoking if it was done right in that same time period.
Derek?
Yeah, I think the problem with Irish Tour 74 is that it's cut with material and at a time when I think Rory was just still developing as an artist, and by the time he got to Stage Struck, he really knew where he was going and what he was doing, and it was sounding much more alive and attacking.
Yeah, but Derek, I don't know if I agree with that, because Live in Europe, which was before Top Priority, that record's on fire.
Rory is always on fire live. I mean, he is unbelievable.
It's very difficult critiquing artists like Rory Gallagher. He is a seminal artist, and it's not right. You can't really critique him, to be honest.
Yeah.
He can do no wrong. That guy's just ultimate top 5 god genius.
Absolutely.
Like hero. Rory Gallagher, amazing.
What about Sensational Alex Harvey Band live?
I don't have any of their live records, actually.
It's not that great, I don't think. Well, what do you think, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, the band were very, very popular here in the UK and I guess in Europe, and not so much in America.
They were completely underground in the States. Yeah.
Right. But the problem for me, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Alex Harvey and I love the band. I think the band's just on fire. Yeah. But the problem for me was that they used to introduce a sort of theatrical element to the performances, which, for some people, I think thought it was great. But for other people, including me, I thought, maybe it just gets wears a little too thin after a couple of plays. I don't know if Bob, you obviously know this record very well.
Not really. I listened to it a couple times, back in the day, and I just wasn't really too into it for whatever reason. I guess it's more of a visual band, so you have to see them. I've never seen them live until recently, seen their videos.
I guess the missing element from that live album is the fact that visually live they were incredible performers, especially Alex, of course, and then you had Zal Clemson, who wore this clown's makeup, and the way he would just look at the audience, and it was just an amazing performance. And Alex, he would do little skits and stuff like that, and it was just, I mean, in many respects, I guess you had a similar kind of that called the Tubes,
right.
In America, which did a similar kind of theatrical thing. But I think Alex Harvey was just, I mean, his performance was incredible. But there's not much footage around, and what footage there is, I guess, doesn't really capture the electricity of them live on stage.
Did you guys like the production of If You Want Blood by AC/DC?
Finn.
I agree. Something about that album just
It's a little too ear hurting, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very. It does it great.
Which sucks because I love the song selection, and for a single album, it's just in your face brutal, but sound quality wise, it's just something about it very thin, as you say.
I agree. A little shrill.
Who recorded it? Was it the production team in Australia?
It might have been Tony Platt. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know we're kind of running out of time, but just briefly, the 80s, there were some, obviously, Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith.
Oh, yeah, No Sleep? Oh, man.
The Eagle Has Landed, MSG Budokan, Made in Life After Death, The Sabbath Live Evil, Angel Live Without a Net, Ozzy Speak of the Devil. Do you briefly want to mention anything about the 80s live albums?
I think the sheen had come off by the time we were getting to those records, and stuff like the Ramones' "It's Alive" was a great double live album. But a lot of the stuff was becoming too processed at that point. People were realizing that you could actually record live albums to studio quality, and I'm not so sure that really worked.
Monte?
I don't know. I just don't have as many 80s live records. I mean, there's Live After Death, there's No Sleep Till Hammersmith. I could pull up a list, guys, because Derek, inspired by your book, I actually started like a Word file on listing every live record under the sun. There's probably stuff on here that you don't even know about. I mean, that's how thorough it is at this point. And I can open it right now and just quickly look through some of the 80s records, which I will do. Let's see. I've got the list open right now. There's Alcatraz Live Sentence, Blackfoot Highway Song Live.
Oh, that's right.
Blue Oyster Cult, ETL.
Raven Live at the Inferno.
Gillan, Double Trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Gillan?
Yeah. What about Bow Wow?
Speak of the Devil.
Yeah.
MSG, One Night at Budokan.
That's a good one.
Scorpions, Worldwide Live. Thin Lizzy, Live Life. God, talk about a shitty recording. Ugh,
yeah, I did not like that.
Mudfest. Oh, Whitesnake, Live in the Heart of the City. That's fantastic.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah. What'd you think about the Angel, Live Without a Net?
I don't love it as much. I like the studio versions better. I never was that in love with that record.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I like the Saxon, the Eagle Has Landed. I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, totally. That's a fantastic one.
What about Sabbath Live Evil with Dio?
I don't like it. There's no crowd in it. It just sounds too studio. Like I said, I don't normally mind when things... I said that earlier. I don't care if it's fake or if it's studio sounding, but it needs a live energy. It needs a fucking audience, And the audience is just so quiet on that record.
Wasn't the story that that people would go in the middle of the night and change the mix on it?
Yeah.
Ronnie Dio denies that, but that's the rumor of why he got fired is because he was doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
Was there anything else in concluding this episode you guys want to add?
I have nothing more to declare except my genius.
So what about your book, Derek? Is this going to inspire you to publish it?
It will come out. I just need to... I want to make it into a kind of a 12 by 12 coffee table book. And hopefully put in either a live CD of a compilation of some of the best performances from that era, or actually a physical vinyl record of live performances. So, but it will come out. It's done. I mean, the whole thing has been written. But I went to a few publishers, but it was almost like being, going to see A&R guys, and you're sitting there thinking, oh boy, why did I even bother to do this when these people are talking absolute rubbish, So, right. I was very disheartened, disillusioned as well. So, but they will come out, even if I...
Yeah, but Derek, I would strongly suggest, because you said you've discovered 20 more records you left out. I mean, if you're going to do it, you waited this long, do it right. I would add that stuff to it. And just, you only have one chance to get this book out. You might as well make it definitive.
Well, that's not true. Like we said earlier, I want to do the enhanced version.
No, I get it, but I'm just saying you've waited all these years to put out the double live, so if it actually does come out, why leave out those 20 records that make...
I'm pulling your leg and other elements of your body.
There you go.
So, yes, of course I will. I will update it. So not
all right. Do it just for me.
Just for you, I'll do anything. Well, do that.
Well, I think we better end now before this gets...
Wait, am I imagining it, or does your voice sound a little better near the end of this call, Bob?
Maybe it is sounding better.
See that?
I gotta get used to talking.
Wait, before we go, can I just dedicate I Just Want to Make Love to You by Foghat to Derek? Because I want to make love to Derek.
We're going to close the show with a live version of that song.
Eventually we can. We can do that. But physically, I don't see that.
Well, very cool, gentlemen. Thank you so much. This was a great episode.
All
right, guys. Bob, feel better. Derek, it's been amazing. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. You can subscribe and listen to all episodes of the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Google Play, and more. Be on the lookout real soon for our new website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Go to our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for up-to-date news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Email all questions, comments, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.